Salman, for this elaborate presentation, which is, I think, have a lot of challenging ideas which need to be discussed in our final Q&A period of the day. So I think we'll open the floor for question and answer. Start.
Your Highness, thank you very much for, I think, extremely interesting, superb resume of the position. And I think everybody here, certainly on the British side, are fascinated by your views. Thank you very much for playing in favour of what you did. I'm not going to ask for a question, Your Highness, but what I would like to do is to make something of a statement. And my statement really is directed to you, Your Highnesses, my friend, His Excellency Hamad, General Hamad, and various other people who are in this room, all of whom have given the British Defence Forces the most marvellous support over a number of years now. But I thank you particularly for what has happened over the last few months, and I may speak on behalf of the Chief of the General Staff, who is sitting on my right, and the Chief of the Air Staff, who is Sheikh Johns over there, the Chief of the Air Staff. The kindnesses we have received from your countries over the last few minutes are immense. They are very much appreciated. They are not taken for granted, and we are very grateful. And I know as long as the Chiefs of Staff, all the ones who are here, and Firstly, we all do recognize just how important this partnership is, and we are determined, as long as we are very in our numbers, to see that those partnerships are fostered and advanced. And I'd like to thank you all very much indeed.
A synopsis of Bahrain's perspective, and what I agree with, especially in that synopsis, is done. The need to prioritize threats and to agree on the priorities. What I would like to hear, if you can elaborate further on what kind of mechanism that we can use in the Gulf to agree on a list of priorities of where these threats are coming from, in a sense that it will only make our job easier to realize what is, for example, threat number 1 or 2. I think if we make a list of where are future threats facing us, we will notice that in most of the GCC states, there is an agreement on, let's say, the top 10 or the top 8 or whatever they are. But how can we actually sit down and agree that our number 1 threat is such and such thing, or number 2 is such and such thing? What are the mechanisms that can actually transcend issues of geography, of proximity, and what is the formula that will make such a prioritization possible? Thank you.
Thank you. If you are speaking on a regional level, in terms of the GCC itself, disregarding our cooperation with the West for the moment, I think it is important to realize that all threats are. It is sometimes a fallacy to try and argue your position as opposed to somebody else's position if they believe in it as strongly as you do. But what we must do is plan jointly against all the threats, regardless of their rankings as first, second, or third. In today's ever-changing world, we must be ready to face any eventuality. And I think, well, at least I know, I'm happy to say that we do that regularly, each year, during our meetings with each other in the GCC. Now, whether that information would be shared with our counterparts in the West through a regular meeting, that could be a possibility as well. As we speak, the foreign ministers of the GCC states are here meeting in London with their European counterparts. Now, there exists no such mechanism between the military leaders in our region and the military leaders here in the West on a regular basis. Now, I can only speak for Bahrain when I say that we would welcome such a thing, but it would have to be left for the rest of the member states to decide to see if that is indeed fruitful and productive. But on a regional level, I think we must plan against all eventualities.
Well, I really have a small question. I need your opinion on this. And also, I need to hear this from our British friends here. Europe has maintained security after World War II by having an organization such as NATO, and has done a wonderful job as far as deterrence of the Soviet Union. It was a well-defined enemy and has worked for 50 years. And obviously, they're facing the dilemma right now. When it comes to the Gulf, we have wonderful relationships on a bilateral level. I mean, every single nation state, almost every single nation state have signed a bilateral agreement with the US, for example. But these remain an executive, or the so-called executive agreements. They're not really treaty level. As Your Highness knows, in the States, a treaty would require Congress approval, and no administration is willing to put that much political effort into signing this one. These executive agreements, which are signed by the executive branch, will have to go through a major process. The West has always proven its friendship, frankly. When push came to shove, they came in the first Gulf War. When the threat persisted in '94, they came in October '94, and in the latest crisis, they did come. However, in the long-term strategy, do you believe that an organization such as NATO is advisable? And what role can British play in asking the Americans to maybe collectively have a NATO organization type that would define the borders of these states and say these are red lines, it cannot be crossed? Is it worth going through that process again?
Between each other or between?
With the West, of course. Instead of having these bilateral agreements only with the West, collectively having one agreement.
Collectively having one joint agreement. If it is appropriate, it might be useful. But what must be realized is that these bilateral agreements that we have at the moment, I mean, nobody's suggesting that we go through some complicated procedure to get them approved or passed by the congresses or parliaments of each individual government. But what I am suggesting is that we work together in creating a joint defensive policy through these agreements. Each country will know its responsibilities in terms of the general plan. Each country will know its limitations. And each country can define its own threats. And each country can assess its commitment to the region differently. So I think through this mechanism that exists already, we can develop the relationship further. What remains to be seen is what will develop in the future, but that is unknown at the moment. I have no ideas on that as I speak. Thank you.
I've been labouring for more than 3 years now on British defence policy towards the Gulf, and I'm very grateful to His Highness for contributing many fresh ideas which we can take away and consider. I'd like to ask him a question about the extent of the Western military presence in the Gulf, and whether he believes that is a stabilising or, in the longer term, destabilising factor. I mean, I've heard the argument from both positions. On the one hand, clearly the presence of Western forces in the Gulf is a sign of our solidarity with our GCC friends and adds to deterrence. But on the other hand, we're aware that the presence of large Western forces is not always welcome to populations in the Gulf, and could, in the longer term, be destabilising within societies there. I'd be very interested to know where His Highness would draw the balance between these two positions.
Well, I can answer that very easily, actually. I'm not Iranian, so I very much welcome the Western presence in the Gulf. Now, the role of protecting the world economy is too great a responsibility, I feel, to place on an organisation solely on the back of the GCC. We have a responsibility to guard and maintain security within our borders, among ourselves, and from removing the oil from the ground and sending it to the tanker. Now, escorting that tanker out of that volatile region takes little doing. And the Western powers are there to make sure that nobody decides to destabilize this whole delicate operation. So I think I can answer you very easily. And no, I strongly support the presence there, in partnership, though, with the GCC as the first line of defense. I mean, we are not saying that the West is there to fight our battles for us. We are not saying that we are not capable of fighting any battles at all. What we are saying is that the first line of defense should be left to the GCC countries. The second line of defense is, of course, the West, provided any, God forbid, calamity occurs. So no, I think you can't have one without the other. I think that's a false argument.
You suggested that there might be some other arrangement, perhaps of a more formal kind, as between the GCC defence circuit, if we call it that, and the Western partnerships, which have evolved in informal fashion. Nearly 20 years ago, I spent a pretty hectic 2 months dismantling CENTO, the Central Treaty Organization. It's remarkable how rapidly it was dismantled when we put our minds to it. So we are. Now, it seems to me from that lesson, which marked me very much, that the very informality of those relationships with Western friends is their strength, and at the same time is something of a shield against embarrassment, criticism or misunderstanding within the Arab community at large. And if there are to be formal agreements of a defensive kind to be constructed within the ambit of Gulf defence, then surely these have to traverse the Gulf itself.
Yes, sir, I was suggesting meetings, not an organisation. Please don't take my words to mean another centre. What I meant was something along the lines of the meeting that is being conducted as we speak between foreign ministers and their counterparts here in the European Union. Nothing more. As a first step. But one must walk before they run. Thank you.
Sheikh Salman, thank you very much for an extremely lucid presentation that I'm sure has impressed everyone. Can I also say that I particularly enjoyed your rehearsal of Bahrain's commitment, not only to the West, but in particular the commitment and sacrifice that Bahrain has made to Britain in the light of some rather ill-judged comments that emanated from this city a few months ago about human rights in Bahrain, which is paying Bahrain back in an inappropriate coin for all that Bahrain has done for Britain. And insofar as those comments now appear to be receding into history, I think that is welcome, and I think your restatement of all that Bahrain, a very small nation, has done was most timely. Could I say that when one thinks about some of the difficulties that Bahrain has faced internally, of course we think about defence cooperation as dealing with an overt external threat, but of course it's every bit as problematic. And just across the road there, I sat in the cabinet room at number 10, and a mortar bomb landed in the garden. Fortunately, it didn't go off, or I wouldn't have been able to go off this afternoon. But we all of us have to recognise that the internal threat, the threat of subversion within our own ranks, the networks that international terrorism weave, where they associate with each other, where techniques are shared, all of these things are in their way just as potent a threat to order in sensitive areas of the Gulf as the overt threat of an armed force coming at you, as the Iraqis came across the border into Kuwait. Do you think we do enough to cooperate on dealing with those threats? And in particular, are we all doing enough to tread on the number of subversives who travel around the world creating trouble and actually fomenting a very potent form of violence against which an armed force as such it offers very little assistance? An armed force can deal, it's very difficult, as we saw, to deal with the single fanatic determined to commit suicide and take lots of others with him. And I'm very troubled that international terrorism is something that we cannot assume is receding as a threat.
Well, I think for a long time there wasn't enough that was done. There was a general euphoria after the end of the Gulf War, and there was a feeling that now that this war is over, we don't have to worry about these problems anymore. But I think the problems have not gone away. I will mention President Hosni Mubarak's latest comments when he thanked the British government for their efforts. And I think there is at least an understanding now of the need to coordinate and to develop our security relationship further, especially in the region of terrorism. And I would like to say that I'm thankful that we're seeing some changes, and we're very pleased with that. Thank you very much.
In this last chairmanship of a panel in this conference, I assure you that you will not see me until the end of tomorrow. And I would like to thank Sheikh Salman for this elaborative presentation. And we conclude the formal activities for our first day. Thank you very much.